You give me life, no gravity, you fly. For you, baby, I won't stop the hands of time. Relax, baby. Give me time and then we'll go. Couldn't call to let you know that I might be your one. Baby, I know it's getting late and you don't wanna wait, but I won't waste your time. And baby, and I want you to know, without me you don't go. So I'ma take my time and all I wanna ask is I don't wanna waste your time. All I wanna ask is 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 baby, I know it's getting late and you don't wanna wait, but I won't waste your time. And maybe I want you to know that I won't let you go, but I won't waste your time. And all I wanna ask is all I wanna ask is
I have a message. I have a message for you. God has sent me to you. I have a message for you. God has sent me to you. Listen, them say, them tell you, say you can never be the one. But God say, make I tell you, say now you him choose in 1 month, in 1 week. You will sing a new song in 2 days, or lesser than. You will hear, congratulations, you're in the glory of God. Congratulations, He has done it for you. And you will come back with a new song to sing. God is good. Yes, you will come again with a new song of praise. God is good. Oh, congratulations. 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 Say what the Lord has done for you. Congratulations. God is good. Them say that I can never be all that I see. I've seen that God is greater than that. Who can battle with the Lord? No, nobody. Who can change His mind about me? Through many years, in many ways, I have seen His faithfulness forever and ever. I will hear, congratulations, I have seen the glory of God. Congratulations, He has done it for me. And I have come back with a new song to sing. My God is good. Yes, I will come again with a new song of praise. My God is good. Oh, congratulations. Congratulations. See what the Lord has done for me. Congratulations. My God.
Congratulations, time for jubilation. Congratulations, no more tribulation. I bring you good news where you cannot refuse. Oh Lord, I told you with Christ that you can never lose. Oh God, oh man, I beg you give me your attention. Very, very soon you will share your testimony. One by one you will tell your testimony. Bigger than money, we say sweeter than honey.
Congratulations, you're in the glory of God. Congratulations, He has done it for you. And you'll come back with a new song to sing. Your God is good. Oh.
One day
You will come again with a new song of praise. God is good. Oh. Congratulations.
Tell it to all. Sit down on the rhythm like a king on a throne. And I put you boy alongside the day. Two and we together in a celebration.
I have a message for you. God has sent me to Bad man drip to the car. Sports cars parked on the right spot. Bad man slick and you know. Bad man looking good in the air. Bad man drip to the car. Sports cars parked on the right spot. Bad man slick and you. Me got a girl on me bed right now. She says she no one leave. She tell me, Ruga, me I want to spend the rest of me life with you. Me say no shit. Oh Lord, fly you to Maldives for a day, then we fly back quick. Then we take a quick jet, fly straight to Paris. You fucking with the creme de la creme. Say she never seen a guy like me. Yeah, she confess. Say nobody hit it right like me. She confess. Bend down, get on your knees, girl, never digress. She really wanna flex with me. She wanna break bread with me. Bad man looking good in the air. Bad man drip to the car. Sports cars parked on the right spot. Bad man slick and you know. Bad man looking good in the air. Bad man drip to the car. Sports cars parked on the right spot. Bad man slick and you. Clarity won't be me. Screw all them niggas, them I won't be me. Ice on me, looking fresh and clean. Definitely put me eye patch on me. Take my vanilla cold stone in my villa. Me one drop your disaster sativa on cold. Say she never seen a guy like me. Yeah, she confess. Say nobody hit it right like me. She confess. Bend down, get on your knees, girl, never digress. She really wanna flex with me. She wanna break bread with me. Bad man looking good in the air. Bad man drip to the car. Sports cars parked on the right spot. Bad man slick and you know. Bad man looking good in the air. Bad man drip to the car. Sports cars parked on the right spot. Bad man slick and you. Me not get time for love, definitely not. Me get girls around to come warm me up. Me and the prince, we pull up in fleets. VSOPs to my monamis. Take my vanilla cold stone in my villa. Me one chop your disaster sativa on cold. Yeah. Ooh, love. Oh, na, na, na. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you won't capture my soul. I'ma get no be so. Make you one bolombo. Better, bye. I'm loose. Even better done the para. Tonight in Josie, I'm in Josie. Won't call if you want Josie. I'm not playing with you, I'm not joking. My thought of mom is loaded. Me, you can fight up, but I'm on molly. I'm on duty, but I'm on low-key. They want do me, they want do me. They want do me, don't they want do me. When you won't want me, when you won't want me. I'm in San Francisco, Jammy. When you won't want me, when you won't want me. I just flew in from Miami. Peru, para. I'm loose. Even Peru done the para. She says you like my too. She said me I never seen a girl like you. Say you like my tattoos. Tell me I want to be inside you. She's my woman. Inside Puna, sweet like sugar. In my new van, come to me, yeah, they swim like tuna. When you won't want me, when you won't want me. I'm in San Francisco, Jammy. When you won't want me, when you won't want me. I just flew in from Miami. Peru, para. I'ma get no be so. Girl, you won't capture my soul. I'ma get no be so. Make you one bolombo. Better, bye. Better, bye. I'm loose. Even better done the para. Tonight in Josie, I'm in Josie. Won't call if you want Josie. I'm not playing with you, I'm not joking. My thought of mom is loaded. Me, you can fight, but I'm on board. I'm on duty, but I'm on low-key. They want do me, they want do me. They want do me, cause they want do me. When you won't want me, when you won't want me. I'm in San Francisco, Jammy. When you won't want me, when you won't want me. I just flew in from Miami. Peru, para, Peru, para. I'm loose, even Peru done the para. She says you like my too. She said me, I never seen a girl like you. Say you like my tattoos. Tell me I want to be inside you. She's my woman. Inside Puna, sweet like sugar. In my new van, come to me, yeah, they swim like tuna. When you won't want me, when you won't want me. I'm in San Francisco, Jammy. When you won't want me, when you won't want me. I just flew in from Miami. Peru, para, Peru, para. I'm loose, even Peru done the para.
All because of you, I be on the phone all night long. Oh. Don't be smart when you do it to me. Oh no, no, no. I be on my business, shawty, but you be on my mind, shawty. Let me follow my honey, Kiss me to the cellular, kiss me to the phone. Can't you see I'm into ya? Can't you see I'm in love? Kiss me to the cellular, kiss me to the phone. Yeah, messing with my medulla. I can't talk alone. Oh no, no. Emiliano, 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 no. Emiliano, 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 no. You're one in Emiliano, 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 no. My Emiliano, 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 no. Wanna know what it feel like, what it feel like. Like I know I see beat for real life, for real life. In my condo, loving up your body in fast and slow-mo. If I hit you, it's my combo. Can you never ever let me go? Dancing kiss me to the cellular, kiss me to the phone. Can't you see I'm into ya? Can't you see I'm in love? Kiss me to the cellular, kiss me to the phone. Yeah, messing with my medulla. I can't talk alone. Oh no, no. Emiliano, 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 no. Emiliano, 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 no. You're one in Emiliano, 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 no. My Emiliano, 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 no. Girl, I wanna know what it feel like, what it feel like. Like I know I see beat for real life, for real life. In my condo, loving up your body in fast and slow-mo. If I hit you, it's my combo. Can you never ever let me go? Dancing kiss me to the cellular, kiss me to the phone. Can't you see I'm into ya? Can't you see I'm in love? Kiss me to the cellular, kiss me to the phone. Yeah, messing with my leg. You sweet like a pippin, mama. I can't fight, I can't kill someone for you, because I'm in a danger zone. Oh no, this feeling that I'm feeling, it's too much. I see future, life with you is so brighter. Nakupenda sana, you know that. I'll die for you. Oh, sweetheart, life with you is so sweeter. Nakupenda sana, you know that. Nakupenda sana, you know that. Yeah. Na hakuna kipya kwenye dunia. Oh my love, kando mana tamana zizuia. Oh my love, natupa maelfu kwa mamia in this world. Ila we pekee niwe kuchagua. I swear to God, na umebarikiwa utu na utulivu. Umebarikiwa utu na utulivu. Licha ya upole na uzuri na utu na utulivu. Umebarikiwa utu na utulivu. Yapo kutufunza, tukipata furaha jinsi gani ya kuitunza. Huko nyuma hukumu zilishanikumba, kama tesa kung'ang'ania kupendwa sipopendwa. Nilifosi kujificha kule, kumbe chakalangu ni hapa. Sasa napewa amani, mapenzi yasio na mipaka. Ananikanda huku mabegani, ananishika na hapo. Masaji ngongoni, yananilevya makopa. Na hakuna kipya kwenye dunia. Oh my love, kando mana tamana zizuia. Oh my love, natupa maelfu kwa mamia in this world. Ila we pekee niwe kuchagua. I swear to God, na umebarikiwa utu na utulivu. Umebarikiwa utu na utulivu. Licha ya upole na uzuri na utu na utulivu. Umebarikiwa utu na utulivu.
Good morning and welcome everyone to the MTN Group's International Women's Day event in partnership with the UN Women. My name is Uto Upana, the Company Secretary of MTN Nigeria, and I will be your host for the day. While it seems like the world is slowly returning to a semblance of normality, the ability to meet fully in person has not yet fully been realized. And we are so reminded that the power of technology is in connecting people wherever they are. So today, all of you that are watching from wherever you are and are still able to participate, we're pleased that MTN women across all our footprint can join us today. And so you might be asking, why are we here today and what do we aim to achieve? As we all know, the 8th of March marks International Women's Day globally. And this year, in alignment with the theme at the UN, we are talking about the role of gender equality in achieving a sustainable tomorrow. As we unpack this important theme, we're grateful to have the UN represented today by Ms. Anne Gethiku-Shongwe, Regional Director, UN Joint Program, Eastern and Southern Africa, and the UN Women, the United Nations entity for gender equality and the empowerment of women, represented also by Ms. Agnes Piri, who's in charge of the UN Women South Africa Multi-Country Office, the partnership specialist there. We are also fortunate to have some of MTN's leadership. Importantly, we'll be hearing from not only the women, but also men too, because they are integral to how gender equity becomes mainstream. Our program will run for just under 2 hours, and we have structured it in a manner that we believe is informative and one that enables you to ask questions that you may have. And starting off us today is someone who I respect greatly, a leader who has placed significant emphasis on gender equity and leads the charge on the advancement of women. He's none other than our Group President and CEO, Ralph Mupita.
A warm hello to you all. As we mark International Women's Day here at MTN Group, I'd like to salute and celebrate all the women and men who are working to make the world a more equal, diverse and inclusive place. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has had devastating impacts on society at large and that women have been more adversely impacted. Around the world, many girls are still being kept out of schools and women are still underrepresented at workplaces and face a disproportionate burden of poverty and injustices. As a company, we recognize that without gender equality today, a sustainable and equal future is out of reach. So as our brand promise, we are doing for tomorrow, today. We are committed to empowering women everywhere and have numerous programs in place across our 19 markets to help achieve this. These include rising leaders and women in technology. We are encouraged by the recent improvement in the representation of women at the MTN Group, where 1/3 of our directors on the board are women and 28% of ExCo members are women as well. But there's much more work to be done. So we are accelerating our efforts to achieve gender equality. As MTN Group, we are committing to 3 very specific actions. Firstly, a move from 38% to 50% women in the workforce by 2030. Secondly, increase women in tech roles, moving from 17% to 30% by 2030. Thirdly, on the pay disparity between men and women, we did a study across our markets to look at if there were material pay disparities for the same work. We found a gap which we are working to close before the end of this year. We really believe in the power of collective action and in joining forces with like-minded organizations to drive this agenda. I commend the UN Women and the He4She Alliance in their work to advance gender equality. That's why we're supporting He4She. I'm sure all of you will join me in supporting their work. As men in the workplace and broader society, it is imperative that we be the drivers of change. Change for a more inclusive society, change for a more sustainable world. It's about doing for tomorrow today. I personally pledge to actively promote gender equality, to make our world a place where women have equal opportunity and a deep sense of belonging. I commit to he for she.
Thank you very much, Ralph, for that wonderful statement, and for personally committing to the program He for She, and the bold statements that MTN Group is making across its footprint, moving from 38% to 50% by 2030, increasing women in tech, and closing the pay gap. Just reading off the notes I took from Ralph's speech there. Thank you very much for those bold statements. Our keynote speaker for today is Anne Githuku Shonwe, the director of the UNAIDS Regional Support Team for Eastern and Southern Africa, and has 20 years of experience as a senior international development professional, including with the United Nations Development Program across Africa and management consulting in the United States of America. Her last post was as the representative of UN Women's South Africa Multi-Country Office, which is responsible for women's empowerment and gender equality in Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Namibia, and South Africa. Anne is an award-winning social entrepreneur and founder of Aerials, a digital and gamification learning enterprise, and is a thought leader of the future of learning. Anne has a master's degree in international development from the American University, a certificate in social innovation from the University of Cape Town, Graduate School of Business, a certificate in the art of large-scale systems change for social entrepreneurship from Harvard University, and a management certificate from Jones International University. And you are welcome.
Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for this invitation, MTN. Thank you to our beloved CEO, Ralph, for your wonderful comments, and it's congratulations to you for the progress that has been made by MTN on your gender equality points. We really welcome and continue to watch with excitement the progress that is being made within the MTN group. Let me begin by congratulations on this International Women's Day, International Women's Month. Most countries in the world celebrate this the entire month. And to all those whose relentless struggle for gender equality, determination, and solidarity is the light of hope and power for change. I speak today on behalf of the United Nations across Africa, who collaborate on this important day to ensure that we remain resolute in our collective commitment to gender equality, in line with the UN Secretary General's own commitments and our commitments together for the Sustainable Development Goals. Every one of the 16 development goals have gender equality, whether it's about life on land or life underwater, or it's about health, targets on education, targets on land ownership, all the Sustainable Development Goals. Gender equality is at the center of each and every one of them. As you know, International Women's Day is a key day for the UN global family. This year, the theme is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. I know that in the private sector across the world, the theme that is used sometimes is different. And this year, the theme is breaking the bias. And, you know, as we think about the Sustainable Development Goals and about building a sustainable tomorrow, every development goal depends on ensuring the rights of all women and girls. Gender inequality is a threat to everyone. We cannot uphold bias and patriarchy and defeat these development challenges, including climate, HIV and AIDS, education, health, and all the different goals. We will come back to goal 17, which is the subject of our conversation today. COVID-19 has pushed back our gains in gender equality on most fronts. We have seen surges in violence against women. We have seen abuse-driven unwanted pregnancies for teenagers all over our continent. We have seen huge increases in child marriage as parents are desperate to respond to the poverty they find themselves in, turn to their daughters, selling their daughters. We have seen huge losses in employment, where in many countries across the region, where there were job losses or losses in business, 2/3 of all of these were women. So as we begin our journey back to normal, let us recall that normal was already not normal. It was already the problem, and that normal was violence against women. In that normal, teenage pregnancy was normal. In that normal, harassment in the world of work was normal. In that normal, it is proportionate infections of HIV amongst young girls was normal. 4,200 every single week are infected in our beloved continent. Millions and millions of girls. One lost a year of schooling due to lack of digital connectivity. 1 million girls dropped out of school this past COVID season in Africa. And yet we have evidence that the most powerful tool for a sustainable tomorrow is for all girls to complete their secondary education. All this and more will require that we build back to a better, more equal, abnormal. So why public-private partnerships? This is the goal 17. Goal 17 is about partnerships beyond our governments, partnerships that include the private sector in a central way. A sustainable tomorrow that pushes beyond the normal gender inequality will require that we hold hands together to accelerate actions for gender equality. Our governments have been pushed to the edge by the reality of COVID-19's impact on our economies. To catch up on the girls' education losses, to ensure that the millions of women who've lost jobs can secure opportunities, to connect the girls and women to the internet and digital assets, to ensure the availability of the health commodities that are required, including the vaccine, and to be prepared for the next pandemics, because there will require that we hold hands together. So I want to emphasize the importance of private sector as a key dividend for the entire UN system and the achievement of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We have to rescue the SDGs. This is the language and the words of the Secretary General, because we have lost ground, we have lost time, and gender equality is an important driver, accelerator for ensuring that we can catch up on these meaningful results. So let's build back to a more equal, more stronger future with gender equality at the center. I want to share with you some results from a survey that was done by Women Deliver, and it revealed the following: that the results, first of its kind public opinion led by women and on Focus on 2013, the 17-country survey representing half of the world's population reveals that the majority of the global public not only overwhelmingly supports gender equality, but they expect leaders, political and in business, to take meaningful action to bridge the gender divide. In fact, 1/5 of survey respondents said that they would boycott or support a company based on the company's views on gender equality, highlighting that it is both a human rights and economic imperative. The survey findings hold a very clear message that the private sector has a leading role to play in advancing gender equality now during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. to truly deliver on health, on well-being, on dignity for all, and build back better from the COVID-19 pandemic, girls and women must be in front and center in emergency responses, in social and economic recovery efforts. The private sector is a powerful partner in advancing gender equality due to its distinctive position as a catalyst and role model for change. Without the private sector engagement, gender equality, which is instrumental to the SDGs, will not be achieved. So I want to congratulate MTN for being a loud front member of the UN's Global Compact's Women Empowerment Principles. You signed this in March 2020, and 2 years on now, we're happy to hear the CEO report on the steps that you are taking to promote gender equality. Welcome the focus of change within MTN, but I invite you to really focus on how you invest in your customer base, how you invest in your networks, how you invest to ensure that every girl, every woman across Africa has access to connectivity so that education, business, health, every need that a woman has is taken care of because of your efforts in that digital environment. So we invite you to stand at the front to transform the society that will truly transform our economies and transform the world that we all want to be a part of. I want to acknowledge and commend the private sector who in our African continent, in South Africa, have put money behind supporting the work of UN Women, the work of different United Nations agency organizations, along with MTN, who have supported work on ending violence against women, who are part of funds like the Gender-Based Violence Fund, the Solidarity Fund in relation to COVID, Standard Bank, ABSA, De Beers. These are important partners, Anglo-American and others, who have been active members. And we want to really congratulate you and to invite you to take even deeper steps as we look forward to building a stronger tomorrow, a sustainable tomorrow that is gender equal and that recognizes the huge contribution of women and girls in Africa everywhere. Thank you, MTN.
Thank you very much, Anne. You have certainly left us with a lot to reflect on, not just as individuals, but also as business leaders. And just listening to you passionately talking about how gender equality is at the core of all the sustainable development goals. And also that gender inequality is not just a threat to women, but it's a threat to everyone. And articulating the impact of COVID-19, which did impact everyone globally, but the greater impact on the women, and also all the, restating the fact that girl-child education is core to actually building back better and a powerful tool for achieving the SDGs. And also the role of how important it is for the public and the private sector to hold hands together as they go and work to build back better. And I'm happy that the MTN is playing a forefront role in this journey. And, the CEO earlier committed personally to ensuring that MTN remains at the forefront of this journey. And it's important to also note that the survey results that you shared with us really leaves us with a lot to reflect upon. Thank you very much once again, Anne. This year's UN Women's theme for International Women's Day is Gender Equality for Sustainable Tomorrow. And this means women are increasingly being recognized as more vulnerable to climate change impacts than men, as they're adversely impacted and are more dependent on natural resources which climate change threatens the most. While MTN commits to net zero emissions by 2040 and playing its part in protecting the environment, MTN also recognizes that climate change is impacting food security across our beloved continent, Africa, and can act to widen the gender inequality gap. Although a challenge, it can also serve as an opportunity. Let's watch this short video.
Earth, our only home. Invaluable, but not invulnerable. Are we too late to save it? Climate change is making our world more dangerous, more fragile, more unequal. In these uncertain times, women and girls face a disproportionate threat of displacement, poverty, and violence. But women and girls are also a powerful force in climate action. As innovators in green energy, as defenders of the environment, and as educators of our generation and the next. Gender equality is not just a woman's issue. It's the path to our survival. So it's not too late to invest in climate action by and for women. Not too late to empower women entrepreneurs and decision makers at home. Not too late to give voice and power to this next generation of Earth's champions. It's not too late to demand commitments to build an equal and enduring future for all. Championing climate action by and for women and girls is the key to saving our planet. Join the fight for gender equality today, so that together we can create a sustainable tomorrow. It's not too late.
I hope you enjoyed that video and certainly take away, like I did, that it's not too late to save our beautiful planet. We have no other home except Earth. And it's not too late to galvanize collective action on climate change. We have to build an enduring future, and we can only do it together. I hope that you realize that every day each of us has a role to play in making sure that Earth is here and that we have a planet we can leave behind. Next on our program, we will turn our attention to 4 key topics that have a profound impact on gender equality today. Breaking down barriers to inclusion of women in the workplace and ensure equitable pay, women's role in driving sustainable development and climate change, the role of public-private partnerships in achieving gender equality, and also the role of men in removing social and cultural barriers. And to share their thoughts on these topics, I am joined by Paul Norman, MTN Group Chief Human Resources Officer, Agnes Piri, Partnership Specialist at the UN Women South Africa, Titilope Fakwede, who's Chief Information Officer of MTN Liberia, and Malik Melamu, the Chief Executive Officer of MTN Sudan. Following this session, we will open for Q&A, so I invite all of you watching today to please post your questions in the chat function. If you would like to address your question to a specific member of the panel, please do indicate who you would like to address your question to. Welcome, panelists. Let's kick off our first topic, breaking down barriers to inclusion of women in the workplace to ensure equitable pay. Gender equality in the workplace can only be successfully achieved when there is equity and inclusion in every sphere of the work environment for women. So there's an urgent call for action in areas ranging from unequal representation of women, pay disparity, opportunity and hiring biases, job stereotyping, biased career pathways, leadership exclusion. I could go on and on. Unintended policy barriers, limited empowerment, cultural biases and norms. Barriers are equally influenced by social, cultural, and environmental contexts, which further accentuate challenges and hurdles. As also observed by the UN Women, the most basic of needs, such as lack of access to education, land, capital, and financial resources and technology, and gender-based violence make it harder for women to get on an equal footing with men in the workplace. And so unconscious bias is fundamental, conditioned, and an inherent barrier to gender equity. What can we do to recondition and influence our own workplace environment to challenge bias mindsets? And I'll start with you, Paul. And just to repeat my question, what can we do to recondition and influence our own workplace environment to challenge bias actions and mindsets?
Thanks, Uta. And it's quite an important question, I think, and fundamental if we want to address, the gender equity challenge that we're facing. I think in my mind, the first step to addressing unconscious bias is to realize that, in fact, we all are biased, whether we believe it or not. I know we often come from a space where we always think it's out there, it's somebody else. But I think, this is probably one of the first steps that we need to acknowledge. And it's important, therefore, that we increase our awareness. We need to challenge our thinking and I think speak up when we see a behavior that is not inclusive. Of course, you and I can master our biases. And as with anything that is inherently conditioned, it simply needs recognition and practice. It isn't easy, I think, but that will probably be the greatest victory for inclusion if we can get that right. So when you are at the receiving end or you are observing biased behavior, I think we need to do everything in our power to change it. And that starts with helping someone understand their own unconscious bias. And that's a critical thing. I think if we talk about diversity and inclusion, this also doesn't happen on its own. We're embedding this in our everyday culture. This is why when we launched our new EVP, I still call it new, but of course, it's over a year old, the EVP that we refer to as Live Inspired, we were very intentional that one of the pillars that we refer to as thriving positivity speaks to ensuring that we all create a diverse and inclusive culture. That means eliminating biases that starts with intentional actions every single day. And it's in how we show up as leaders, as colleagues, and as friends. And we have a responsibility to create a culture where every MTNer is treated with a mutual respect and where bias, bullying, discrimination is addressed with urgency and decisively. And I just maybe, in closing, just think about some of the actions that we've done. And I'm sure many of the MTNers will recall late last year when we launched an awareness campaign that we dubbed Do Better. which was really made by and for MTNers to create awareness of day-to-day unconscious biases. So when we plan to do more, we are actually thinking to do more of these awareness campaigns in the future, and to ensure that we all become aware of our unconscious bias, and most importantly, that we know how to tackle it. I think you can also expect a lot more of the self-awareness tools. I spoke earlier about self-mastery, and I think, like I said, it's going to be the greatest challenge, but I think also potentially our greatest victory. And then finally, I think diversity conscious actions. You know, we don't realize just how the biases carry out in our everyday actions. And putting in mechanisms that curb the inherent bias is what we have tried to do, and we are trying to continue to get right. And in fact, we have introduced the global standards for inclusive hiring to meaningfully promote equity practices with a special focus on gender diversity. So Uta, I hope that sort of gives some, I guess, intention and guidance on how we look at that from a workplace perspective.
Thank you very much, Paul. And just you articulating that the first step is for all of us to realize that we are all biased, and to make sure that we do take very conscious steps, and particularly at MTN, ensure that everyone is treated with respect and have a diversity consciousness. Thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to stay with you, and I'm going to ask you to share your thoughts on a topic that's very important for many women, and that's on gender pay disparity in the workplace. This is a real concern, and a lot has been written about it, but why exactly does it happen? We know that governments, regulations, and corporations in the world are taking on this challenge, some more successfully than others. What does it actually take to make pay parity a reality in the workplace?
Thanks, Uta. Again, this is one of those key points that we've been paying quite close attention to in recent times. And I think we'll see a lot happening this year and ongoing into the future. But I think to answer your question more specifically, I think gender pay is a formal corrective and preventative strategy to identify gaps and then to close the existing pay gaps while remediating for the future. So it's the starting point, and I think it's important to indicate this. It's the starting point for driving equity. It begins by acknowledging that pay gap and undertaking very tangible measures to reduce and eliminate the pay gap. But I think there's also a misnomer that the pay correction will eliminate pay gaps. And this is an important point that I want to make and hopefully land well here. That is that this isn't actually the case. You know, what pay gap does is hold a mirror in front of us on what I would refer to as the systemic and inherent causes that lead to disparity. So the gap doesn't only exist because of biased compensation for the same job, but it's also because of several other factors, like the imbalance of women across the company, particularly senior levels in the organization. So we have to particularly focus on making sure that we have enough representation of women at all the levels, and obviously much more at the senior levels, but across the company, this is a very deliberate action that we need to take. Also around career pathways, we need to make sure that they're very defined and clear and specifically designed so that women can follow those. And then I think the other one is around making sure that we have sufficient representation of women in all the job categories, and particularly if I think of MTN in the critical skills area. And there are a number of things that we're doing here. And then I think one of the final point really around this is also around differentiating components that include the ability to retain women talent. So it's one thing to drive these things, but you need to make sure that the environment is such, and in our language, the culture, that actually supports women and keeps women in the system. So addressing and mediating these gaps are going to be vitally important if we want to address this issue. And for us, achieving gender equality then means equally focusing on pay parity. And pay parity, like gender equality, is the pathway, in my view, for a sustainable and equitable future. So as I close out, maybe this year, there's several things that we're going to be focusing on. The first one is around creating opportunities for women in technology roles, because that's a clear area where we need to index up and make sure that we are driving this space very deliberately. And our regional STEM talent programs to develop and attract women talent are going to be focused there. And the STEM skills for tech and non-tech MTN women are particularly where we're paying attention. I think the second one is creating equitable opportunities for women in transformation programs and critical skill upgrades. Yeah, you know, there are many global programs that we're running that's transforming the company and so on. And we want to be sure that we have women placed into those programs so that they not only in the areas that are impacting the business and transforming the business, but in many cases they can lead those transformations. And that's part of breaking down some of the biases and creating the right skill sets in the right areas, as I've spoken about. The third one is on continuing and expanding our Rising Leaders Women's Leadership Program that I know several MTNs women have already been on. And here the intention is to develop, grow, and improve female talent in the leadership positions particularly. And we have a very big focus this year where we're widening that to include many more people. And then we are also evaluating, as I said, our compensation-related pay parity measures. And you will hear from us very soon on this as well. So I hope that's also given some flavor, Uto, on just what we're doing with regard to this at MTN.
Thank you very much, Paul, and for particularly articulating the specific steps that MTN, the pathways to which MTN is walking to ensure that that issue is addressed. You've articulated creating opportunities for women in technology roles, creating equitable opportunity for women in transformational programs within the company, and also improving and widening the focus on leadership roles, as well as evaluating compensation pay to fix the pay parity issues. Thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to move on to our next topic, which is the role of women in driving sustainable development and climate change. Climate change has brought about not only extreme weather conditions and the increase in diseases due to high temperatures around the world, but the resulting burden is disproportionately experienced by women and children, particularly those in the outskirts of the developing world. Evidently, we have also seen women in leadership and in sustainable development positions driving adaptation and mitigation strategies while advocating for positive environmental and social impact. As such, sustainable development policy shifts have considered women empowerment and gender development needs to shape and influence collective climate change action, to create sustainable economies and a climate resilient future. Agnes, I'm going to pose this question to you. In Africa, women and girls experience the greatest impacts of the climate crisis as it amplifies existing gender inequalities and puts women's lives and livelihoods at risk. What opportunities and structural changes can we create to advance progress and support women's resilience due to climate change ripple effects?
Thank you, Uto. Thank you so much. I think we all know, we all live in, right now in South Africa, it's been raining. So we're living in a changing world that really has been impacted by climate. And I think for us as UN and other agencies that deal with this, is to really focus on technologies that can actually be given to the women, especially in farming. We know for UN Women, we are supporting a program on climate smart resilience supported by Standard Bank. And that program is running in South Africa, Nigeria, Malawi, and Uganda. So I think it's private sector also investing in things like that in terms of how do we support the rural areas, in the rural areas especially where they're mostly affected by climate change. How do we innovatively and creatively actually be proactive? Because climate change, if we look at the cycles of climate change, every year it happens. So I think it's in terms of how are we proactive with our policies at government levels, private sector itself, civil society as well, pushing policies on climate change, and just ensuring that we are more prepared for issues of climate change, considering it affects mostly women and children. I mean, if we go to rural areas right now where there's cyclones, if we go to informal sectors where there's, if you live in an informal setting and it's been raining for 3 days, you lose your property. You lose your space of where you are as a woman and children in the family. If you go to rural areas, your bridges are washed away. If you go to places where the infrastructure doesn't exist, again, you're affected by the climate change. So how do we proactively, as people that are really have the responsibility to do this as private sector, as the UN, as government, as civil society, and any activist, to make sure that climate change actually is at the top of our agenda. So I think it's to constantly think, creatively. How does, if it's for MTN, how does technology help us with, dealing with climate change? How do we empower those women with mobile phones that, they have mobile phones? How does it alert them in terms of what is the climate, what is going to happen now when the climate changes? It's going to rain. What do you do? How do we use mobiles, technology, to really be more creative in terms of, the resources we have and the solutions we have to mitigate effects of climate change? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Agnes. And you have just articulated why there's and emphasized that there's a need to proactively and creatively support policies that will support our women, whether they're in extremely remote, hard to reach areas, create that awareness, think about how technology can support the efforts. Thank you very much. I'll ask you to just stick with me as we move to our next topic. And this is looking at the role of public-private partnerships in achieving gender equality. And even Anne, during her opening remarks, talked about the importance of public-private partnerships. And these are widely promoted as central to driving gender equality. The multi-stakeholder approach is crucial in addressing challenges and significant limitations of gender in business and society. As a key input of socio-economic transformation and in providing practical guidance, several unique initiatives have been exemplary in refocusing gender equality. And some of these initiatives are with the UN Global Compact, Women's Empowerment Principles for Business and Gender Parity Program, and the World Economic Forum's Women Leaders, just to name a few of these initiatives. So Agnes, your job is to drive those partnerships. And I understand that you are leading discussions with MTN. So public and private sector have a key role, definitely, to play in gender equality agenda. I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether these public-private partnerships have been effective in contributing towards gender equality, the gender equality agenda in Africa. What role can organizations like the UN Women play? And what What do initiatives like the He for She seek to achieve? And what is needed from the private sector? I know I've given you a whole bouquet of questions, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on all these.
No, thank you, Uto. Thank you. Yeah. So public-private sector partnership, very key. Very key, because without private sector or without other key stakeholders like civil society activists or the government itself, we cannot achieve gender equality. We cannot even achieve development. So I think for us as UN Women, I think our strategy has always been, how do we use our public advocacy platforms like your Women Empowerment Principles, your He for She, your conference on the status of women, which is going on this month, has just started, the CSW, and our partnership with the Global Compact. So for us, we always try to seek like-minded private sector in terms of have they signed on WEP? Because once you sign on WEP, as MTN has done, it's very clear in terms of how you achieve gender equality, because the 7 principles are very clear. So it's up to the private company as they sign up to really internalize the women empowerment principles or the He for She, because we've got best experiences in terms of how other companies have done this. And for us, we've always said, signing up is good, but how do you put your money where your mouth is, as they say? If really, really we are saying we want to change gender equality within organizations, but even within the communities we live in. I mean, our other partners, but I suppose I cannot mention in terms of competition, is they've said, okay, fine, we've signed up on this, but show us programs within our footprints of where we operate on the continent in terms of how do we support women better to achieve that gender equality that the company is aligned with. So for us, we look at in terms of the partnership is beyond just the signature, but let's look at in terms of those principles. And for UN Women, for us, it's usually principle 5, which is the supply chain, because we know that procurement is the biggest enabler also for women-owned enterprises to benefit. So the company itself should say, okay, this is our supply chain. How do we monitor our business spend, where it's going in terms of procurement? Is it women-owned businesses that are really, really getting the business, or are they getting the small change? So the company itself can look at its supply chain, because again, you're really promoting, it's about women empowerment. You empower women, you empower society. We know how that goes. And then again, is to look at the leadership within the organization, which MTN, as the CEO explained, they're already making strides in terms of their targets. You change that leadership in terms of how do we bring more women to the table? Because in all fairness, if we bring more women to the leadership table, they're able to actually articulate the struggles of a woman in a rural area in an informal setting, or just a woman who's trying to get onto the board. So again, it's just the company itself in terms of embracing the women empowerment principles and really making sure that they live up to those principles. The He for She is just getting leaders to also commit for gender equality. And I think when we look in the video, you'll see we have leaders that have committed, like Iceland, where if your pay inequality is not aligned, you can get fined, you can get in prison. So they've made it like a legal law. In Malawi, the previous president made child marriage, he banned child marriage. So again, those are issues that a leader within the private sector or as a government can actually make effort. So for us as UN Women, we can't really push a company to do what they need to do, but we try to dialogue in terms of look at the women empowerment principles. And in most cases, most of the companies have started on that journey, but it's just now to really subscribe to the international standards of, how do we do our own gender assessment tool and gap and assess ourselves whether we're on the right track or not, and then putting money where it's key. I can give some examples of some of our partners that are supporting some of our programs, and in the UN, I can actually acknowledge that most of our programs for women empowerment are supported by private sectors and donors. So you can see where private sector is really say, this is it, we're going to do this, and then you can see the results in 4 years. The women's lives are changed in rural areas, like the climate smart agriculture I was talking about, that's supported by Standard Bank. De Beers is also sponsoring some informal women at the micro level. These are the women who are not even registered, but your spaza shops, etc. in South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana. So we have companies. We have APSA also supporting our mentorship program. For the women that can really how do you run a business? How do you make sure that you can access opportunities in the supply chain? So we want partners to come in and then look at our programs and then say, yes, we can make a difference here. And I think for MTN, for us, it's always, as Anne was saying, it's a digital space. You have the technology, you have the know-how. We don't have that type of expertise. So as we talk about climate change, as we're talking about access to education, and we know the world is going digital. We right now, we are all virtual. We are not sitting at the MTN offices. It's virtual of different countries. That's where the world is going. But is the continent ready? Are our girls ready? Are our sisters in the rural areas ready for this? Or are they being excluded? Because the UN runs on the principle of leave no one behind. So if we're doing development, I think private sector should be saying, who is being left behind? Who can we bring on board so that every woman, whether in the rural area, whether they're not educated, in the peripheral areas, the vulnerable groups, can be part of accessing that partnership as well. So I don't know, Uto, if I've answered you. I've been all over, but yeah. So for us, is those platforms that we.
Thank you very much. I gave you a bouquet of of questions, and you responded with a bouquet of answers that address those questions. So thank you very much, Agnes. And particularly to note that we should leave no one behind, no matter where those women are, they must not be left behind. And the collective action of governments, companies like MTN, the larger society is so important to addressing these issues. So thank you very much, Agnes. We will move on to our next subject. And this is I'm going to ask Titi to stay with me here. And so as we look at the role of men in removing social and cultural barriers, and this is a real issue, particularly in Africa. So we see that men are about 50% of the population, and there are long-standing challenges like certain hardwired roles for men, social and economic inequities, cultural and traditional barriers, pressures of discrimination, stereotypes and biases, and several other factors. These place a greater emphasis on men to proactively own and be the change for women's rights. And so, Titi, I'm sure in your role, you're more often than not the only woman in the room, and technical roles are dominated by male counterparts. How can these roles be made more accessible for women?
Thank you, Uto. Yes, you're right. Most times it's either me alone or a couple of other females in the room, depending on what's happening. So I'm going to be answering this question also from a place of experience. I've been in MTN for some time, and I've also held highly visible and mission critical roles across technology domains. I mean, this has also come with a lot of responsibilities. So with this, there is a need to ensure that value is always provided without much focus on the gender, just to make sure that we're able to deliver the A game on the results. So all of this has transitioned over the years from being an engineer, and now I'm the CIO. So I mean, I'm going to be sharing some of the experiences. Like you said, today I'm practically the only female CIO. I'm the first female CIO at MTN Liberia. At the Exco in Liberia, we have 30% female. So that's something that Ralph also spoke to earlier on in his message, that we're going to be increasing, especially also in technology. And also for technology, it's still a far cry from what it should be. It's a journey. We have moved from where we used to be, but we're still on the journey. So across the journey also, I have worked with different female managers, but definitely more male managers compared to female on this journey. And there are also instances where we had majority of senior leaders in a department, like 80% female, and they all delivered on the job. So it's not an issue of capability. We just need to give women the opportunity to showcase their capability and not let biases set in at all. So through this journey also, leaders have believed in me, right? And a couple of others. I've not been the only female in some of the tech roles. So it starts with believing in the individual. Not that, even if when you also identify potentials that can be exploited, you need to also challenge ladies, women, as the case may be, and provide opportunities for them to grow in the field. So some of these things are the realities on the job. I would also like to talk about specific experiences and some of the struggles that women face, especially in technology roles, balancing work life, with family life, comparing both of them, especially for technology roles. There are instances where there are major outages, and as a technology professional, you need to be available to support, and you also have maybe a family to deal with. So balancing that can be a challenge, or you are in meetings, as the case may be. And there are also instances where, as female, you just feel that you're not, maybe you want to avoid this opportunity because of your gender. So these are the realities, these are the current struggles. So some of the issues is maybe lack of encouragement, lack of support system, unconscious bias. I think it was mentioned earlier on, this is very real. It's unconscious, so even individuals do not really realize that it is there. So it's important that we look for opportunities to address this. There is also having role models to look up to, female role models that look like you. When you see people that look like you, then you can look up to those responsibilities and desire to grow along that journey and not fall on the wayside, as often happens. Flexible work hours is another one. So all of these experiences that I have mentioned show the need for, I'll be talking about 6 key interventions that male can be put in place to ensure that we encourage more women in the technology space. First is making a deliberate investment to grow women colleagues. We need to be intentional about having a diverse workforce. Some of it has been spoken earlier on in this webinar, where we have to be intentional, even in terms of recruitment, forums like this, having these open discussions where people are able to pick learnings, mentoring sessions, develop women, support and recognize these women and their goals and their potentials also. It's important to be deliberate about it. There are instances where you have women forums, women development forums. For example, in Liberia, we also have a forum for women where you develop the leadership pipeline. So these are deliberate interventions that can be put in place to attract and ensure that we retain women, especially in technology roles. The other one I want to talk about is equal opportunities to both male and female, irrespective of your gender. Give them equal opportunities to training, opportunities for upskilling, exposure. I think Paul mentioned earlier, exposures to critical projects, transformation projects with high visibility. Challenge them. Let's have all of this. Equal pay, that was also mentioned, and equal representation at all levels. These are important things that we need to do in terms of empowering the women, to female employees, to be able to negotiate their roles, especially for growth opportunities, and to retain them in technology space. The other one I would talk around is creating awareness about unconscious bias. It's also been mentioned. We've done that quite a lot in the organization, and it's something we need to keep doing. It's unconscious. We need to break the stereotypes, societal, different traditional barriers that exist, but we need to keep at it in terms of addressing these underlying attitudes and how to deal with them, so that gradually, as leaders, as individuals, we look out for all of these exclusions. And there are some assumptions that women cannot handle some things, or a woman should be taking minutes of meeting, which should not be the case at all times. Yeah, so it's being deliberate, looking out for this exclusion, and also championing women colleagues, their achievements, showcase them, show that you value them at their achievement. Women are capable and they can deliver a game at any point in time. Just give them the opportunity. Some of this also is another key one is flexible working policy. It helps with the work-life integration, as I would call it, because I'm not sure if there is a balance, but at least we have to find creative ways to integrate all of this together. And then as leaders, we should be bold in driving gender bias. It's very important. It's a shared business goal. I think Ralph mentioned it in his speech, that we are driving that balance to grow female across all levels. So it's modeling this inclusive leadership across all levels, make it visible, authentic, and you gradually see the tone from the top cascading down across the organization. And it's a journey, obviously, and we started seeing some change, but we need to do more and keep at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Titi. And the very key takeaways, as well as messages that have been emphasized by some of our panels. And I'm happy this message keeps coming over and over. And I guess the more we all channel into this, the more achievements we will, the more progress we will make. So when you mention work-life balance, I keep asking myself, is there really a balance anywhere? So you have emphasized the importance of making deliberate and being deliberate and intentional about a diverse work and inclusive workforce, equal opportunity for both men and women in the workplace, creating awareness about unconscious bias, and championing and showcasing that, yes, women can actually do these roles, although there's societal biases and barriers about what women can or cannot do. And more importantly, the flexible work policy, MTN's new employee value proposition, addresses that significantly. And also modeling inclusive leadership, tone at the top, and cascading this throughout the workplace, very important. So thank you very much, Titi, for the insights that you have shared. Malik, I will like you to thank you first for joining us, and I'd like you to share your thoughts about when we talk about the role of men to remove barriers. What does the role shift mean for men? And how easy is this? And how can women also play a part to help our male counterparts to make the shift? Malik, please unmute your mic.
Thank you for having me here, Uto. It's certainly an honor to be here and to be invited to discuss such a key topic. It's something that you mentioned, that it's really what does it mean to men? And it means, some of the speakers have spoken about cultural barriers, societal barriers. They're built into us. So it's a massive task. It's a big mindset change that's required of men. So some of the things that have been discussed are already most appropriate, but I think what I do as a leader, and I have to try and do, is to communicate, lead the awareness charge, make sure that we regularly have open discussions about diversity. It is not something that's sitting housed in the HR department and that it is me who's talking about it. I have to actually model it as a leader. And for myself, I have to look for any diversity initiatives within the company, not as the CEO, but as a man, and make sure that I understand and I participate in those initiatives for my education. And in order to make sure that people see that it is important for all of us to do so. We have to build a psychology in men that says, it's not that suddenly women are coming to take everything away from you. It's an alliance. So you have to make sure you're an ally. You have to understand that we are partners, we're equal. And you need to be the best ally you can to women in the company. To get over this big shift that has to take place, I think one of the things I practice is I listen a lot. I listen and I listen and listen. Why do I do that? Because with men, we tend to overestimate the success of diversity initiatives within our organizations. We look at statistics. Oh, I employed a new EXCO member, and it's a female, so it's one. And for men, they tend to blow that over and tend to make it seem like we're really making huge progress. Sometimes we don't really understand how far we are from the destination as men. So the whole idea of listening, learning, participating in initiatives, what I'm trying to build is also driving a more transparent sharing of information about diversity, because there's a huge amount of ignorance. We assume that one appointment of a woman today is a massive step forward. But if you look at it in the context of the company, you'll realize that it's not even a drop in the ocean. So I think for me, this mind shift of men has to be driven by such. Men who are in positions like mine actually have to actively drive it. You have to realize that it is a strategic initiative and it's part and parcel of the sustainability of the company. If we don't get this right, we're not going anywhere. One of the questions I often ask myself to help myself along this journey is that in my position as a CEO, what would I do if my mother was the female, depending on my attitude towards diversity within the organization? What would I do if that was my mom? And I think that's probably a value-based approach that I have, because for me, my mom is everything. I am who I am because of my mom. So I often, in my head, personally ask myself, well, if that was my mom there, what would I do? I'm quite sure I would be fair, I would be open, I would be transparent, I would make sure she gets the best she deserves. And I think that's probably a psychology that we need to have to break down this mental barrier that men have. On the side of women, you asked the question that what can women do to help this? I think Titi mentioned it, is that when women reach those positions of leadership that they well deserve, they should make it their total focus to empower and open the door for other deserving women. We have to do it as men, but I think once you arrive there, right, you should actually exemplify the requirement of leadership, male or female, is to empower people. But I think as a female leader who has deservedly reached that place, you need to make sure that you are pulling up deserving women behind. You need to make it part of your agenda. It has to be mine, but you absolutely, it's an obligation for you, because sometimes when we get in positions of leadership, male or female, we tend to get so focused in driving the work we're doing and we forget what we're doing. So all I can say to female leaders who are in their deserved positions, Titi, you are in a tough area, the technology area, but I'm quite sure you will acquit yourself well in terms of pulling up the many deserving women in the technology space. I think that's my answer to your question.
Thank you very much, Malik. And you just changed the dynamics there by asking the question, what would you do if it was your mother that depended on this? And so, you've identified that the cultural barriers, it requires a massive mindset change, and also the need to communicate and not leave it to HR alone to lead the awareness campaign, but also you as CEO actively participating in initiatives that help you actually understand the subject. So that, and also listening. We often underestimate the importance of just listening. And there's something you said that I'll just read, that we often don't realize how far away we are from the destination. And just beginning to walk down that route as well. And also critical, women supporting women. Very, very important as we try to address all the issues and all the factors surrounding gender equality. My final question is still to you, Malik. And you've said a lot about how, what men need to do. And you've also talked about how all the things we need to do. But how do we move from just talking about these things to actually doing? What practical advice would you give to men in how they show up for women, both in not just in the workplace, but at home and in the larger society?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And if I were to give a quick answer, it would be just do it. That would be my quick answer. But obviously here you'd like to hear some of my thoughts beyond that. What I try to do is without creating any reverse discrimination, but I actively take my time to sponsor talented and deserving women within the company. So I mentor people from managers, senior managers, and general managers. I offer myself as a mentor. I do it through the group HR mentorship, and I must say that the majority of mentees that I have are actually female. And it's not by choice. It's just happened because I'm mentoring talented people. So that's an indication of the talent we have within the company. So that's one thing, is that we must actively sponsor. One of the other things I think we have to do to bring this more to practicality is the issue of transparency. Make sure that there's fair access to information across the company. Sometimes certain information is kept in little clubs, boys club type of information that maybe not everyone should see, where it regards recruitment, statistics about diversity. We need to make sure everybody has access to that information, because sometimes in organizations, even the women don't know how far behind we are. So we need to make sure there's transparent access to information. One of the other practical things is our socialization as men, is that even when we're in an exco and there are women in the exco, when we're giving out, distributing tasks, for instance, who's going to take the minutes of the meeting, who's going to do this, there's an inclination that it's always women. Or for me as the CEO, when I'm away and I'm choosing someone to act, then I automatically choose a man. And then, so one of the things I try to do is I try and rotate tasks. One, so it's not seen as discriminatory to anyone, and two, everybody has a chance to do everything. So the so-called juicy jobs and the ones that we traditionally give tasks we give to women, everybody has to do them. So I think that's something to think about. A number of the panelists have spoken about work-life balance, and I have a different view on this, and it's something I'm still trying to develop in my mind. But I read something that prompted in my head a thought that said, the problem with work-life balance is it almost makes us think that those are two separate things. You have your work, you have your life. But you have a human being who's coming to work every day, and in this case, particularly women, and they have kids at home, right? So is work-life balance, can she actually separate the two things, whether mentally and even physically? So I think we should be talking about work-life blending. Work-life blending. I think we should all think about that it shouldn't be, I shouldn't feel uncomfortable, right, if I have to sit in an office with my child because my child is sick. That's an extreme example, but we have to blend it. For one of the things we tried in MTN Sudan a couple of years ago is we set up a nursery school in our premises for the kids. So staff, female staff, have their kids with a caregiver downstairs in a nursery. And at lunchtime or during their breaks, they can walk and go and see their children. They don't have to worry that my child is not well and I have to drive across the city to see them, and I'm still expected to deliver here at work. That's an unfair requirement. So I think we need to focus as organizations on work-life blending. And I think the best advantage we got was from COVID, because it has showed us. I love having meetings with my team, and I hear behind, "Mommy, mommy." Initially, my female EXCO members, they used to cringe and say, "I'm sorry." And I say, "Why are you sorry?" Because for me, at the end of the day, it's reminding me that we are human beings. And I think we need to talk about work-life blending, not work-life balance. I think the issue of pay inequality, I think Paul addressed it very well. And I think that's something that we, in the organization, we probably just need to study it a lot more closely and have concrete actions to deal with it and demystify it. Another thing that I think we should probably look at is deliberate pushing of talented females, is that when we do recruitment, for every one, we must demand that for every one male candidate we have, there should be 2 female candidates. It's a way of forcing, pushing the envelope a little bit, because you'll have a better chance for top female candidates to get through. So those are some of the things that I think we should do in terms of pushing this difficult task we have. And I definitely am committed to he for she. That's for sure.
Thank you very much, Malik, and your responses actually demonstrate that you've given great thoughts to the subject. I like the fact that you have rephrased the work-life balance issue, and you call it work-life blending. So we'll take that away, work-life blending. And also, I recall that you also mentioned that we need to look at this not as an invasion,
Yes.
but as an alliance. Very important there. So I want to thank all of you for your very candid and honest responses during this panel session. Please stay with us, stay with me as we go to the Q&A section. And just to remind everyone who has joined us that please post your questions in the chat section. And if you would like a specific member of the panel to address your question, please indicate that specific panel. We have some questions and comments that have come through. And I'll start. There's a question here for you, Paul, and I will go to it now. And it says, speaking of women in technology and rising leaders, what's the criteria to be included in such?
Thanks, Uto. So yes, I think with our intention and our purpose around these programs is really to, in a sense, make this accessible to all women at MTN. So that's the starting point. What we have done with the programs are that they have been curated in a sort of way that I'll call them sort of personally created programs. So in that sense, we're running them in batches, and we talk through into the leadership teams and getting the batches to join. So in that way, I think you can access it. It's not, the technology programs are not only for women who currently are in tech. It's about how we move them into those programs. And the Rising Leader programs are essentially how do we get more people ready for leadership roles. So it's open to everybody. But there is a process that we're running and doing it. So I would just suggest that the various people who are interested talk through their HR people and their managers, and in that way they can gain access to these programs. But our intention, in fact, this year, on the Rising Leaders program particularly, is to widen it in a very much more than we've done in the last year. By that I mean getting more access, more people onto the program, and we've also lowered it into the organization to widen. So it's very much At the moment, our focus will be at the middle of the organization to really sort of bring more women there and help us fill the pipeline to put more people into the senior roles. So I would that's how I would respond to the question.
Thank you very much, Paul. I have another question here for you, and it's from. It says, "Is the gender pay gap reported as part of our annual reports?" And the person has specifically explained that the reference is to the average percentage difference in pay between men and women at the different levels. That's levels 1 to 6 across the business units.
I guess that's an important question to ask, and I can say that if you look at our report coming out, our integrated report coming out shortly, you will actually see it there. So for the first time, we are actually going to be reporting on on gender pay parity, and specifically because for us, the whole, I think Malik also spoke about transparency and just making sure that this information is out there. So we have been in a process of actually collating the data, understanding the data, and it was partly to the point that we want to address the pay, the gender parity issue. So we needed to understand what the actual data points are in the organization, and that's what we've reached. And just closing off on that, but we've also made a commitment that as of this year, and this is now reporting on last year, but the report that will come out now, we will include that sort of gender pay gap as has been described, and we'll continue to report on how we actually are addressing and reducing that gap as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Paul. Still another question here for you. You've gone viral today, I guess. So, and the question is, how do you ensure that your salary is reviewed and adjusted in line with closing the pay gap?
So this is the process that we will run. As I said, where we're sitting right now, we've done this in all the opcos. That's why it's taken us a bit of a while. We started this last year, the middle of last year. We did the top 8 opcos just to understand exactly where we thought the major issues were. Once we had a view of that, we then expanded it to every single opco that sits in MTN. And we've pretty much concluded it. So what we're doing now is we've run an external audit process over all the payrolls in all the opcos, and we just in the next week or so we'll probably get some of the final ones that haven't come in yet from an audited perspective to give us a final view. We then taking that data point, and we are then understanding where the gaps are in which countries, and we are then going to go through a process where we are going to understand what it is, what the fix is going to be required, and we then put plans around that to actually start addressing it. So it's not so much that somebody has to come and say, I have to have my salary addressed. We are actually doing it across the board and looking at using the frameworks and the policies and the processes that we've aligned to address it. So I guess the short answer is that we are dealing with it across the board. It's not necessary for individuals to raise their hand, but I guess if at some point they feel that maybe they haven't been addressed and they thought they should have been addressed, then it's worth raising it. But as I said, if they fall into the categories that we are looking at, we should be picking it up anyway.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move away from you, Paul, and there's a comment that has been posted in the chat box. And Titi, I'm going to ask you for a quick advice for the MTNer that sent this comment in, and she says that she's female in a technology role, and what she did was to grow horizontally due to lack of opportunity in a senior role in senior roles for women. There are no real support based on gender, yet we are equal on the job to be done. What quick advice would you give?
Okay. Growing horizontally is not a bad, it's not a problem. I mean, I've had to do horizontal movement at different times across my career also. But yeah, moving up requires both two parties, right? From the individual perspective, developing capabilities and competences that would help you succeed in that role. And also from the leader's perspective, also being deliberate and ensuring that we're bringing women to this role. I mean, I mentioned I am currently the only female CIO across MTN operations. I mean, so that is some deliberate step that is being taken. And I have also been able to at least deliver on the job. So it's important that it's two ways. For the individual, keep challenging yourself. And as a leader, create opportunities for people to showcase their capabilities. These capabilities exist. There is nothing saying that these female leaders or female individuals, women cannot deliver on this task. So we need to be willing to also give them opportunity to showcase some of these capabilities. So it's a two-faced approach. Good enough as an organization, we are now also going into another dimension where we are taking deliberate steps in making sure that this happens. So I think it's just for us to, we're on the right path, and to make sure that in terms of execution, we execute this well so that across all the operations, we can be sure that everybody is actively taking steps to grow female leaders.
Thank you very much, Titi. Very sound and insightful advice. Paul, back to you. I have a question. Well, I have a comment, and I would like your thoughts quickly on this. And it says, men can only hope this focus on gender balancing will not create an unwanted gap somewhere, especially in the nearest future. Your thoughts, please.
Maybe I just missed the first part. I would say I'm not sure exactly what the statement is.
So I'll read it again. It says, men can only hope this focus on gender balancing will not create an unwanted gap somewhere, especially in the nearest future.
Oh, okay. No, not at all. I think, I mean, I think Malik also spoke about allyship, and it's not us and them, and we succeed together. And I think, even though MTN still has a way to go, when you look at what MTN has achieved, and I think Titi Lopez is an example sitting here, we have many, many of those women who have shaped MTN, made it a success. Even if you go back into the 90s, MTN had 3-4 women at the senior levels of this business. We had women who drove the expansion of MTN. We had a COO, which was the second most important job in the company, that was a woman. We had a woman who basically set up MTN Iran cell. So, we had our first woman CTO in Nigeria, which was the biggest network at the time, and still is probably, back in the early 2000s. So this is MTN's history. We just have to make sure we expand it and that we grow that. So I don't think there should be any fear from anybody that they're going to be left out or left behind. This is a case of just reflecting who we are and reflecting what the world is. And I think in that sense, we should be proud, and we should be driving this with urgency, to look at this, because I think we can show the world and show the continent that we don't have to be scared about this, and that actually the more we do this, the more all of us thrive.
Thank you very much. And just to reiterate, we succeed together, and no one will be left behind. whether it's our male counterparts or the female. I see Malik nodding his head in acknowledgement that no one must be left behind. At this point, we will have to move on. Thank you all for your questions, and let me thank our eminent panel. Paul, Titi, Malik, Agnes, thank you very much for your candid, for your insightful responses. Once again, thank you very much for honoring us with your presence today. So at this point, I'm really excited to tell you about this initiative. He for She is a solidarity campaign for the advancement of women initiated by the UN Women. Its stated goal is to engage men and boys as agents of change by encouraging them to take action against negative inequalities faced by women and girls. And it's grounded in the idea that gender equality is an issue that affects all people, socially, economically, and politically. It seeks to actively involve men and boys in a movement which was originally conceived as a struggle for women by women. MTN is in discussions by UN Women on this. Let's learn more about He for She movement and the impact it's having on society.
We want to end gender inequality. And to do this, we need everyone involved.
I think it would be fair to say that my colleagues and I have been stunned by the response.
This cannot be a burden just for women. We men must play an active role in ensuring a more just world.
It's about engaging governments, businesses, and universities, and having them make concrete commitments to gender equality.
It was up to me to make sure that particularly women are getting the position and the opportunities to be successful and fulfill their potential.
Within 3 or 4 years, we're going to have equal pay.
I want Schneider to be a place with gender equality at every level of our organization.
We invest an enormous amount in communities and female micro-entrepreneurs around our mines.
The assumption that women and girls look after the home and the family not only discriminates against women, but limits men's participation in society.
I sit before you now, having nearly 250,000 of the law enforcement population in the UK signed up to this already.
We shall commit ourselves to ensuring that there is no gender-based violence, there will be no child abuse, no forced early child marriages.
We want to help other companies also take steps forward.
And part of this liberation movement requires that we call out and break down these social norms and barriers to our well-being so that we may all be free to be our true selves.
Tonight, the skyline is a bit dimmer. Many iconic buildings are turning off half of their lights to illustrate the amount of power that's lost without the equal inclusion of women in business, education, and government.
You're my best friend.
You're my best friend.
Rock on, San Diego!
I hope you enjoyed and you took away some learnings from that video. Let's just take a moment just to let this sink in. And he for she. everyone has to be involved. Men getting involved, engaging world leaders, leaders in the corporate world, the academia, leaders in the larger society. The impact of 10 by 10 by 10. And just engaging on multiple platforms to ensure that gender equality and to show the world that create a world where gender is just a spectrum of beauty and not a limitation. Those were the things I took away. Please note down the things that you took away watching that video. And let's join the movement. Together, we can actually make it happen. We still have such a long way to go, but I believe that each step that we take is a step forward. And when we play our role together, we will get there. At MTN, we are finalizing our commitment to the He for She Alliance. Real change happens when MTNers like you and I commit to gender equality and creating an environment at MTN and beyond where every woman can live inspired. And we have a special video made by MTNers.
I imagine a world where we know in the deepest part of ourselves that we matter, where I can raise my daughter that she's strong and enough for herself.
Where I can be anything I want as a woman, from being an engineer to a doctor to a CEO, and why not a president of a whole nation?
Imagine a world where I can be seen as equally competent in a room of people, where my aspirations are valid, and I'm given a fair chance at making an impact without bias.
I imagine a world where I can take a walk whenever I wanted to, where I can express my feelings freely, where I can have a freedom of my own choices.
Un monde où la femme peut être présidente d'un pays.
I imagine a world where I can be a wife, mom, and progress in my education and career.
Where my efforts are appreciated without being judged that I was favored because I'm a lady.
Where I can see an end to gender-based violence.
Where women rise to higher positions, such as presidential posts, as the norm, not the exception.
Imagine a world where I can be anything, where my competence is not judged because I'm a woman or based on my looks, where my mistakes are not overvalued and my achievements understated.
I imagine a world where I can do wonders and inspire other women to do so.
Women are equal.
I am a woman,
and I'll play my part
in our mission for a gender-equal world.
I will be brave, fearless, and courageous.
Stand up for myself and for other women.
Because fairness is our right.
Speak up even when it's unpopular to do so.
I will not apologize for who I am.
I will not conform to stereotypes.
I will not accept the status quo.
And be silent in the face of injustice.
For my fellow MTN women,
I will cheer you on
and be your biggest supporter.
Have your back and advocate for you.
I will lead with care, compassion, and empathy.
I'll be the voice of the present and the future.
Empower, mentor, and guide you.
Be the change we all want to see.
Do better.
For me.
For you.
And for all of us.
Gender inequality
is among the greatest challenges of our time.
We have a responsibility
to act now
and make gender equality
our mission.
It begins with me.
I commit to creating an environment at MTN where every woman can live inspired.
I commit
to create an exclusive environment
where women can thrive and grow equally.
I commit to help build a world where women feel safe, free from abuse, violence, and fear. To empower and support women
in the workplace, in society and communities.
I commit to fight the status quo.
To break the bias.
To challenge our actions and behavior.
To do better
every day
for all women.
I commit
to be an ally to the women of
MTN.
To own my part in the solidarity movement
for gender equality.
To inspire others to be champions of he for she and she for she.
I commit to she for she.
I commit to he 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 for she.
Imagine a world where we can be anything we want to be. I am so proud to be part of a company that places front and center topics like gender equality, and that every MTNer, including leadership, as you have seen from that video, commits to the principles of moving and making sure that we continue to make progress on this journey. From wherever you join us, wherever you're participating from across our various footprints, thank you for joining. And I'm so proud once again, I'm just brimming with pride to be an MTNer at this moment. To close off today's session, I'd like to call on Nompilo Barafo, Group Chief Sustainability and Corporate Affairs Officer, to share her thoughts on gender equality for sustainable tomorrow. You're welcome, Nompilo.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Uto. I'm so inspired this morning. Thank you for the opportunity for me to close. It's such a privilege for me to close on behalf of the MTN Group President and CEO, Ralph Mopita, who's not here during the session as he's participating in the most important issue of spectrum auction in South Africa. It's our first one, and it's going to ensure connectivity for all South Africans. It's been quite an inspiring morning, and I don't have words that I could add more to what my colleagues have said. I think for us at MTN, the whole world has put a line on the sand and said there'll be a celebration of women on the 8th of March every year. But as you could see from our MTN colleagues, this is a conversation that's ongoing in the organization every day. It's just to share a personal story. I joined MTN 3 years ago, heavily pregnant. And for me, that said a lot about the values and the culture of the company, because I was interviewed pregnant, but I was not turned away as a woman. There wasn't any notion that said, I'm not going to be able to do my job because I'm carrying a child. So for that reason, I joined MTN, and I'm very proud to be part of this organization that's put issues of women front and center of discussions. As you heard from our CEO, we have tangible plans that we want to achieve in terms of making sure that this is not just a talk shop, but it's actually achievable. So on that note, I wanted to also address a bit what Agnes from the UN Women said about societies and rural women and communities. So what you've heard today from Paul and from Malik, from Titi, and from all the colleagues that spoke on behalf of MTN and our challenges and the opportunities we see in this area is that everything we do internally, we make sure that it's felt externally as well. So it's a discussion for another day altogether, what we do for rural communities and for women in general, especially in the markets where we operate. We're very excited about the opportunities that have been opened up by partnerships with the UN Women, now He for She Alliance, and we're going to be making sure that we continue that the impact and the lessons that we've learned from signing the UN Women principles, etc., are felt across our markets. That's our intention, because we believe that public-private partnerships are the way to go for us, not only to have programs, but to actually influence how the continent operates and how the issues of women are being viewed. Because if we cannot influence from a policy perspective, of how women are viewed and the issues that we deal with, we would have not been able to use our influence to the full benefit of society, in our view. So on that note, I would really like to thank all our speakers from MTN, particularly my colleagues. I would like to acknowledge and thank Anne Shongwe for making the time. She's in New York. She woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be part of this conversation. She's been part of this for the past 2 years now, which is something that we really appreciate, the lessons and the journey that we have embarked on with the UN Women. I congratulate my colleagues at HR, Paul and his team, for making sure that we always have tangible plans that can be felt throughout society and be felt throughout MTN, that we're taking matters of diversity and inclusion seriously, and they front and center in terms of sustainability and ESG at the core for MTN. So on that note, really thank you to everybody on behalf of the MTN Group Exco, and particularly the CEO, who asked me that I really impart his apologies for not being here today. But as we all know, he's pushed all of us to make sure that this issue is highlighted. It's part of the LTIs at MTN. It's part of the ESG at the core. It's part of the KPIs and our targets going forward. Now, my personal commitment, as the team has asked that I share, is that there's been a lot of conversation about rural communities and women in rural areas. I'm one of them. I'm the product of a community that was very poor, a community that is still poor, but it makes the most in making sure that children, boys and girls, understand their role in society, they understand their growth areas, and they're able to thrive and flourish in everything that they do. So I commit, as a person that comes from that type of environment, to always shine the light on the women in rural communities and make sure that they are not left behind, but they also get to enjoy the benefits of what every other child is being afforded in the whole world. On that note, back to you, Otto, and thank you so much for an inspirational morning.
Thank you very much. And beautiful, inspiring story from Mompilo. And I'd like to close today. And just to remind all our women and men across our various footprints, from wherever you joined us today, that together we have to move forward the agenda on gender equality for sustainable tomorrow. And on that note, it's been my pleasure hosting you today. Thank you and goodbye.